You might become disabled in your legs. When I, hospitalized due to an accident, was told this by the doctor, my mind went blank. But more than that, when my husband, who heard this with me, said, "That's why I told you don't get a dog. If you hadn't been walking the dog, you wouldn't have had the accident. I'm divorcing you. I will demand property division," and went to file for divorce on his own. My mind went from blank to utterly empty. Yet, for the sake of my beloved dog, who died protecting me, I decided to keep living, and also to seek revenge on my best friend who betrayed and used me. My name is Mandy. I have always loved dogs, so right after graduating high school, I became a dog groomer and started working. My days were filled with joy and fulfillment, taking care of dogs I loved. I also loved talking with dog owners, believing that there are no bad people among dog lovers. I had always lived at my parents' house, always with dogs by my side. The sudden misfortune struck me when I was 26. While I was away on a trip, my house caught fire. The fire started from the neighboring house. My parents, who failed to escape, passed away, and only the dog, who managed to flee, welcomed me back. At that time, I somehow continued working but lived each day in tears. Seeing me like this, my high school friend Abby said, "Why don't you take a big step and get married? I'll introduce you to a good person," and introduced me to Joe. Joe, 4 years my senior, had a robust physique and a reliable appearance. He worked at a decent company, not top tier, but it seemed he couldn't find a good match in his marriage hunt. He looked at me and exclaimed, "Wow, you're ideal, just my type." He was cheerful and dog-like, which made a very good impression on me. When I mentioned that I like dogs, he said, "I'm definitely more a dog person than a cat person, even though cats are popular now." We talked about the good things about dogs, and before I knew it, we started dating and got married in 3 months. Things happen fast when they're meant to be. We registered our marriage before the wedding ceremony and started looking for a place to live. I intended to bring my dog, so I was searching for a pet-friendly apartment, but Joe said, "What? You're keeping the dog? Can't you find someone to take it?" I couldn't believe what he said. He liked dogs, but had no intention of keeping one. When I said I absolutely couldn't do that, he said, "Dogs need daily walks, right? I'm not taking care of that." So I promised, "I'll take care of everything." I promised that. No excuses like "you couldn't make my dinner because you were taking care of the dog, okay?" Understood, I'll manage. In hindsight, I should have reconsidered marrying him then, but we were already registered and I didn't even think of that option. I had no choice but to appease him to live with my dog. Eventually, we rented a pet-friendly apartment, but he constantly complained. "The dog is noisy. Hey, there's fur on the carpet." Unbelievable, paying high rent for a pet-friendly apartment and it's dirty. Whenever I was busy at work, I asked him to feed the dog. He'd snap. "You have no dinner for me, but the dog gets to eat? You care about the dog more than me." Still, I wanted to continue working, but he finally said, "If you can't do the housework properly, quit your job and become a housewife, or give the dog away." So I reluctantly resigned and became a housewife. However, his salary wasn't enough to afford our current apartment. Thinking of having children, I wanted to save money, so I decided to invest a little of the inheritance I received from my parents. At the beginning of our marriage, Joe persistently asked about my parents' inheritance, and I had a bad feeling. I told him, "It's not much, about $50,000. I'll keep it for buying an apartment." I didn't withdraw it. In reality, it was about $200,000, but I wanted to use it to open my own shop one day, so I understated the amount. That's why I didn't tell Joe about starting to invest. Another reason I kept quiet was because he, who only had a high school education, looked down on me. I realized after getting married that whenever I tried to express my opinion, Joe would dismiss me, saying, "What's the point of a high school graduate like you thinking? Just shut up and do the housework." He never listened to me. If I mentioned that I started investing, he would surely say it's a waste of money and to stop it. I realized too late that he was just looking for a convenient servant when he was into marriage hunting. I couldn't tell Abby, who introduced him to me, about this. When she asked, "How is he? He's manly and a good guy, right?" I lied. "Yes, he works hard and is a good husband." I wanted to complain, but I didn't want to make her feel responsible. Abby believed my lie completely and smiled contentedly. "Aren't you getting married, Abby? What about the boyfriend you were dating before?" We've been together so long that it's hard to bring up marriage. I want to, though. It's tough if the guy isn't willing, right? Exactly. You were lucky, Mandy. Joe was eager right from the start. Yeah. Well, he was actively looking for marriage from the beginning. It's because you're such a great woman, Mandy. I'm really happy to see you so happy. I had mixed feelings, but thought it was okay if Abby was happy. The investment, which I started on a whim, turned out to be surprisingly fun, and I became more and more engrossed in it. When I got used to it, I boldly withdrew more of my parents' inheritance to increase my investment, which hit big. In 3 years, I was making an annual income of $400,000. I was surprised myself, but I never told Joe. By that time, his domineering attitude had become so tyrannical. "You're just lazing around at home and can't even cook properly. How much is a dog's food costing? You might as well eat dog food." He would repeat such cruel remarks. There was no intimate life anymore, so having children was out of the question. If even a single dog hair was found, he would yell, "Can't you even clean properly?" So I had to clean every corner of the house before he returned. Joe started working overtime more and coming home late at night. "Business at company isn't good," he said. But he often came home smelling of alcohol. I wanted to question if it was really work, but I kept quiet to avoid being yelled at. If I went to bed before him, he would wake me up saying, "Who goes to bed before their husband?" I had to wait for him to return and wake up before him in the morning, leading to constant sleep deprivation. The word divorce started floating in my mind. I felt bad for Abby, who had introduced us. That was the only thing keeping me from divorcing. Still undecided, I went for a walk with my dog with shaky steps. I carelessly crossed at a red light without noticing an oncoming car. My dog, noticing it first, stood in front of the car to protect me. When I came to, both the dog and I were thrown onto the road. I only fractured my leg, but the dog died. Thinking of my dog who protected me, I spent my days crying in the hospital bed. However, Joe, without any consideration for me, complained. "When are you going to be discharged? There's a pile of laundry." He even insensitively said, "Well, at least there's no dog hair on the clothes now." My fracture was a difficult one to heal, and the doctor said after surgery, "It's unlikely to heal completely. We'll do rehabilitation, but you might become disabled." When I returned to my room in shock, Joe, who had heard the conversation, yelled, "This is because you walked the dog. Marrying you was a mistake." Am I useless to him because I might become disabled? I was speechless from the shock. To think I would lose my beloved dog, possibly become disabled, and be verbally abused by my husband whom I had served for so long. Joe went home, and I spent a sleepless night. The rehabilitation was tougher than I imagined, but my heart was more wounded. After that incident, Joe neither visited me in the hospital nor contacted me. As I was deciding to divorce him, he suddenly appeared and said, "We're getting a divorce. I'll demand property division. This is all your fault." He wrote the divorce papers himself and handed them to me. I signed the divorce papers as he instructed. He seemed to have filed them immediately because he returned the same day and shouted, "I've filed for divorce. The property division is $50,000. You have your parents' inheritance, right?" I thought if it meant cutting ties with them, it didn't matter anymore, and agreed. Fine. I even wondered if he had been after my parents' inheritance from the start. Joe seemed taken aback by my nonchalant attitude, but said only, "Well, the lawyer will come later. Make sure you have the money ready. I'll use it to move out of that house." And then he quickly left. Later, a lawyer came and hesitantly demanded the property division, but I paid it promptly. By then, I had a certain plan in mind. Soon after my discharge, I heard that Joe and Abby had remarried. Apparently, they used my property division to rent a new apartment and registered their marriage quickly. A friend who told me this was surprised I wasn't shocked and said, "Why aren't you surprised? She was your best friend. Isn't Abby terrible?" She was angry on my behalf. Why wasn't I surprised? Because I had known about it a little earlier. In fact, the truth was worse. I should probably say I felt more anger than sadness. In reality, Abby and Joe had been dating before I married him. I found out about this while I was hospitalized and mentioned thinking about divorce to a friend, who then told me. She happened to see them arguing in a store. It was before my marriage to Joe, and it seemed Abby was refusing his wish to marry. Since my partner was Joe, she was surprised but couldn't tell me and had kept silent. In other words, Abby introduced me to Joe because she was bothered by his desire to marry by 30. That's because she was supposed to be dating her elite boyfriend at that time. In short, Joe was always her second choice. I don't know if Abby and Joe were together while I was married to him, but given their lack of morals, they must have met occasionally. I somehow knew that Joe's frequent overtime was due to their relationship rekindling. Revenge on both of them became one of my goals. For my other goal, I continued to work hard on my rehabilitation. Then, a year later, after finishing work, I checked my private smartphone and saw 30 missed calls from Joe. Mandy thought, did he find out? Just as I was about to make arrangements, Joe called, and I accidentally answered. Without waiting for my reply, Joe started shouting, "You were on TV, right? What's this about owning a dog salon?" I sighed at his usual presumptuousness and said, "That's none of your business, is it?" "Yes, it is. Where did you get the funds?" "It's only been a year since then. If you saved it during our marriage, it's joint property. That means property division." He sounded eager for money, pressuring me with his intense voice. The old me might have been intimidated, but now, as a small business owner, I had gained some confidence. "You think you're getting money? Sorry, but no. Parents' inheritance doesn't become joint property." "What? The inheritance was $50,000, right? You lied." "Yes, I lied. So what? I thought someone might take it away." When I stood my ground, he was momentarily speechless. But not to be outdone, he said, "But even so, you couldn't have built that fancy salon with an attached dog run, right?" Yes, my salon was large, with a spacious dog run attached, unique enough to attract TV coverage. Thanks to that, the shop is thriving, fully booked for the next 6 months. But I did build it. After all, I made $400,000 a year. "What?" His dumbfounded voice was priceless. Just hearing it was refreshing. "Wait, what is that? There's no way a high school grad like you could earn that much." Still harping on about the high school thing. What a patty man. But I did earn that much. It feels like something my dog in the afterlife blessed me with. Lies. $400,000? Impossible. Right. That's not inheritance, so it's a matter of property division. I was ready with my response. Sorry, but nope. The money was earned from my parents' inheritance, and I'm a sole proprietor, so the income was part of my business funds. Yes, when my investments started doing well, I had registered myself as a sole proprietor for precaution, saving the profit as business capital. So it wasn't part of the marital property. To my explanation, he seemed stunned and said despairingly, "How could this be?" Wondering why he was so troubled, he confessed, "Abby has been buying luxury brands without telling me, and now we're drowning in debt." Indeed, Abby always had a high regard for elite status and owned many branded items. That's unfortunate, especially since I'll be demanding compensation from both of you next week. The total is $110,000. Good luck. I laughed heartily. What? It took time to gather evidence. Also, I was busy setting up my own shop, but I'll make the claim formally. Look forward to it. Wait, what? $110,000? The compensation for infidelity is $30,000 each, right? That's $60,000 for both. And the property division I paid, I'll just have that back, so $50,000 plus makes $110,000. What infidelity? I didn't cheat. You did. Right from the start. I know you were with Abby even before you married her. When I firmly stated this, Joe let out a whimper like a frightened woman. And then, as soon as I had an accident, you filed for divorce and demanded the property division. The worst kind of man. I wish you had to pay more compensation. As I continued to shout angrily, he replied in a scared voice. Wait, please. That was because Abby told me she was pregnant and I panicked, thinking I had to divorce. That pregnancy? You two don't have any children, right? Yeah, that's right. Right after we registered our marriage, she said it was a misunderstanding. But I couldn't back out then. It wasn't my fault. What a pathetic man. His words themselves prove his infidelity. I checked the recording light, confirming that I had caught him in his admission, and said, "Thank you. Now I have evidence." Realizing he had been trapped, Joe finally understood and cried out, "Wait, what I just said is a lie! A lie!" Ignoring his cries, I hung up the phone. Of course, I blocked his number and forwarded the conversation to my lawyer. As the testimony from my friend alone was weak evidence, I had been trying to gather proof of Joe and Abby's infidelity for a year. Struggling to find any due to it being a past event, this opportunity was perfect for me, and I grinned. As promised, I claimed the full $110,000 in compensation. Apparently, Abby had misunderstood her own pregnancy and confessed to her elite boyfriend, only to be dumped by him and run back to Joe. That boyfriend ended up marrying a company executive's daughter. Abby might have been the real second choice. 6 months later, while shopping in town, I happened to see Abby. Living a rough life, her once praised beauty was nowhere to be seen. Dressed up, but with messy hair and rough skin, she looked pitiable. Joe's tyrannical behavior at home might have affected her. Then she noticed me and approached aggressively. "You liar! You said Joe was a good husband. You were the one who said it." To be called a liar at this point, I was so stunned that I couldn't close my mouth. I always hated it. Top of the class, but you chose dogs over college? Working happily. While I'm exhausted at work, you should suffer. She began crying and shouting in the middle of the street, attracting a crowd. "So, this is what you get for what you've done." When I calmly said that, she turned bright red and ran away, never to be seen again. Later, Joe and Abby constantly fought and eventually divorced. While their relationship worked as lovers, marriage was different. Abby had to move back to the countryside with her parents to pay off her debts and the compensation, working in a factory. Joe, now the subject of office gossip for causing 2 divorces, voluntarily resigned and is scraping by through multiple part-time jobs. As for me, my dog grooming salon is more popular than ever, and we're discussing opening a second location. And about my leg. Thanks to rehabilitation, I can walk normally now. I'm excited to get a new dog and go for walks again. Surrounded by loving dogs and their owners, I'm living happily.